All right, you wanted to hear about successful EVP messaging experiments. Here we go. The first one I want to talk about is loss aversion. This happened to be a mail piece. For those of you who are not familiar with the behavioral psychology concept of loss aversion, it's the basic concept is this. People hate losing things. We hate losing things so much that we will be more upset at losing $3 than we will be excited at like finding $3 in our pocket. We are averse to losing. All right. How did we manage to successfully put a concept like that into a voter turnout message? Well, we did it by targeting what's called drop-off voters. These are people who vote in presidential elections, but we consider them low propensity or unlikely to vote in other elections, like in this instance, 2022's primary and midterm elections. And so what we did was we kind of flipped the script. Instead of making voting in a midterm, or in this case, a 2022 primary, something new that they needed to do, we wanted to convince them to do this for the first time. Instead of doing that, we endowed them with the value of their previous vote. What we said was, thank you for voting in 2020. Don't ruin all this good stuff that you just started. You just had a good voting record. You just voted for the first time in a presidential election. Don't screw it up. We wanted to give them this thing of value and then paint this upcoming election that we know from public voter files they never vote in. We wanted to make it seem like that would be a loss, that they would lose something if they skipped that election. They would lose this valuable thing that they had accrued. Very simple design you'll see here. We do not care that our stuff looks pretty or ugly. We just care about it working. On the other side, you'll see it was even uglier, but it was very simple. You want to be a good voter. We had a little bit of what's called social pressure messaging in there. Who you vote for is secret. But the real thing, this loss aversion messaging, thank you for voting in 2020. Keep your good voting record in 2022. It was all about don't screw up this thing that you've now got. It increased turnout 0.8 percentage points over our control group. And we know that this was a statistically significant result, which means it was not due to random chance. Perhaps most interestingly, though, that 0.8% bump came almost completely from men. This is also the type of data that we're really, really interested in, because we want to be able to send the most effective messaging to the right subsections of these low propensity environmental voters whom we're targeting. All right, so loss aversion, that's one example of a successful message that's worked for us. Another one, and many volunteers might recognize this is a brand new experimental result that we haven't announced yet. This was the volunteer postcards that many of you sent to low propensity environmental voters for the Philadelphia mayoral primary that just happened a few months ago. We had a little bit of social pressure, I'll get into what that is, and some of this same loss aversion. So here we were thanking people who voted in 2022, great job, but they had never voted in a municipal election, and we wanted them to vote this past spring. So thank you for voting in 2022. Keep your good voting record by voting in the May 16th election. And this is what our volunteers wrote. So that loss aversion message was there. We also had a little bit of what's called the typical social pressure message. This is reminding people that who they vote for is secret, but whether they vote or not is public record. If you remind people that whether they vote or not is public record, that also tends to increase turnout, because we know that being a good voter is a societal norm that most people buy into, even if they're not good voters. And so if you let them know that, hey, like your neighbors can check on whether you vote or not, that drives turnout through the roof. What we now know from recently updated voter files, and congratulations to all of our volunteers who wrote those postcards, we had a statistically significant result where we increased turnout just from these postcards alone, 1.5 percentage points over our control group. It's a big result. A big result. Ask Donald Trump how big a deal 1.5% is in Pennsylvania. Obviously, it's easier to do it in an odd year, but still a big result. All right, The last successful messaging experiment that I'll go through, and this is from a few years ago, tested the behavioral psychology concept of endowed progress. This happened to be a digital ad. Yeah, I know the colors are loud. I know it hurts your eyeballs. That's the point. We don't want to make pretty stuff. We want to make stuff that works. And this worked. A little digital ad. It wasn't even a video. It was just a display ad, a boring static ad. The idea behind endowed progress is if you've never voted before, we don't want to make it seem like you're going from 0 to 1. Instead, we want to make it seem like, oh my gosh, you're almost there. You're almost voting. You just need to take this one last step. We are endowing people with this idea that they've already progressed close to the finish line. You're registered to vote. You're active on the rolls. The last step is just voting. The last step is just voting. These simple, very, very cheap static ads, not even video ads, increased turnout 0.5 percentage points, which because of the size of the audience was a statistically significant result. So these are 3 examples of endowed progress messaging, loss aversion messaging, and social pressure messaging that we have found to be extraordinarily impactful. And we have the receipts on our website on the results tab to prove it. These are statistically significant results in randomized control trials, which means there is a greater than 95% chance that this was not due to random occurrence whatsoever. We have controlled for all outside variables.